Hello and welcome to Movie Film Studios, the only podcast where two wannabe film studio executives take the best ideas from the latest Hollywood trailers to create the half-baked blockbusters that you'd actually want to see. I'm Isaac.
And I'm AJ, and this week it's a Super Bowl spectacular as a pair of aggressive tornadoes whisk us away to the Emerald City to be put in captivity by an army of intelligent apes. But before we get into something new, it's time for something old as we check in on our last feature in Box Office Report. Last episode, we released the horror comedy, the R-rated horror comedy, There's Method to the Madness. And as is wont with our productions, for some reason, something went wrong.
If you follow the trades at all, you might have seen that the Madam Web reviews were not great. We got a bit of a heads up from Sony Studios saying that, you know, when we're casting this trio of stars, that maybe, you know, having a film set in the Sony Spider-Verse is not the best place to be drawing from. And it also just so happened that around that time, Adam Sandler caught wind of the fact that there was going to be some sort of film where he could have a holiday to Australia. So he and David Spade and Chris Rock and Kevin James kind of hijacked the production a little bit. And I was a little bit worried to start with. I mean, you and I had this conversation, but then when we started looking at the spreadsheets, it really just makes a lot of financial sense to...
I mean, we kind of looked at like the example that Warner Brothers set with axing Batgirl and turning it into a massive tax write-off. We kind of saw the writing on the wall with Madam Web, and obviously we had cast the three female leads, the three young female leads from Madam Web in our movie under the sort of, thinking that, oh, we'll sort of ride the wave of that. Clearly, it hasn't worked out. And the fact that Adam Sandler came knocking and wanted to take over production and recast it all and put his friends in there, we kind of just looked at each other and went, okay?
I mean, it's a risk prospect, right? There is a certain risk with casting those unknowns, but there is also a mathematical formula to Adam Sandler films, which is just like, it is your budget times 0.5 or whatever. You're always guaranteed that whatever your budget is, he will make just enough to justify the cost of the expense of the film. So you're taking a risk, and then essentially by putting Adam Sandler in it, you're averting that risk and guaranteeing profit. The only issue is that we either forgot to tell Adam Driver or he just ignored the message that was sent that it had been recast. He showed up for filming in a mocap suit, and we already had Kevin James in the mocap suit trying to play it. And so it kind of turned into this weird, passive-aggressive, tete-a-tete back and forth between the two actors as they both were trying to play this creature. It actually worked out really well. So there is that tension in the real life, which translates to tension in the first level of the meta film, which then also creates this weird tension because we CGI'd two sort of versions of the monster, a bit of like an Abbott and Costello, but in horror form, and that creature just sort of reads on film as this like two creatures that hate each other but are also trying to create terror in this universe. I think it actually worked out really well.
Yeah, I think so too.
Despite the fact that it could have gone all astray, but as with anything, these things all do seem to work out in the end. And, obviously Adam Sandler's under contract with Netflix to produce films, so now it's on two streaming services. You're doubling our profits everywhere, really. Yeah.
So again, I think we just have to thank Adam Sandler for saving us this time from a Madam Web hype train that was derailing. All right, on to this week in trailers. And as my intro hinted at, it has been Super Bowl week.
It is that time of year. I think a lot of the big studios hold off on releasing their real, flagship productions to air for the first time during the Super Bowl. In fact, I think it costs something like $7 million for a 30-second snippet in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Some films just go, we're going to play you a 30-second trailer to the trailer, and then just say now available online. So if you want to watch the full version, we couldn't afford to put it in here, but you can go online and get in the the YouTube discussion comments and pay for it all. Pay for it all there.
Absolutely. It's interesting too because it kind of creates this world where there are films that are bigger than blockbusters in the sense that they are Super Bowl trailer worthy, which I think is sort of an echelon beyond your average, $150 million film. If you can get it to the Super Bowl and spend that $7 million on a 15 to 30 second trailer, that's it. Like, that is, to me, that's where we need to be at. That's the level that our films need to be at. They need to be not blockbusters, Super Bowl trailer worthy.
Really fun fact about the Super Bowl this year, more people watched the Super Bowl this year than watched the moon landing in 1969. It's the first time ever that has the number of viewers has beaten the moon landing. So the moon landing was, I think, the most watched television event of all time until the 2024 Super Bowl. So in terms of getting eyes on your whatever you're trying to sell, there is either you put it on the side of Neil Armstrong's spaceship and you get a lot of people to watch it, or you air it during the Super Bowl. You've got two options.
Or you just have the Super Bowl on the moon.
I mean, I think that's probably the next likely thing. Although, having said that, I think the reason that more people watch the Super Bowl this year than anything else is like the Taylor Swift narrative.
That's right.
Because she's bringing in a completely different demographic, right? There's a demographic that watches American football, and there's a demographic that listens to Taylor Swift songs. There's not a lot of crossover there. The fact that you've now got her bringing in all of those people with, eyes on the prize, watching her current boyfriend playing the game, it's just that many more eyes on, whatever you want to market.
The mentality with bringing in Taylor Swift is exactly the same as spending $7 million on a 30-second trailer. There was probably about 30 seconds of footage of Taylor Swift sort of peppered throughout the game, maybe.
I think they...
there it is right there.
Did some maths where, they just, her getting involved has put in something like an estimated increase in revenue of something like $1.2 billion just into the Kansas City Chiefs organization. It is, she is such a massive force on her own that she can really sort of sway the things here.
I think this is something to definitely dwell on.
It's definitely going to be
later on in this episode.
We're going to do casting for whatever film we come up with, but we'll see how we go.
All right, first trailer for this Super Bowl spectacular is Twisters, directed by Lee Isaac Chung and starring Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, and Anthony Ramos.
Tyler Owens calls himself a tornado wrangler. If you feel it, chase it! I said if you feel it, chase it! All right, here we go. Oh, she's perfect!
She's gorgeous!
You thought you could destroy a tornado.
We never had a chance.
I just want to open by saying I have a massive man crush on Glenn Powell. There's just something about him that, everything that I see him in, I'm just like, oh man, what a cool guy. I want you to be my best friend. And if things go further, I wouldn't say no. And so every time he starts showing up in these films, I'm like, oh yeah, man, I'm sort of so on board just because you're in here.
I've only ever seen him in one other film.
Maverick?
And No, I haven't actually seen Top Gun Maverick yet for some crazy reason. The only other film that I remember him in is The Dark Knight Rises, where he plays one of the stockbrokers that gets kidnapped by Bane's crew. And that's it. And I was like, I'm sure I've seen this guy somewhere before when I was watching the Twisters trailer. Contacted the Academy, looked at his filmography table and found out that he was, and I believe he doesn't even have a name in that. I think he's just stockbroker number 2 in The Dark Knight Rises.
He's in a rom-com with Zoe Deutsch, I think, called Set It Up. And then he's in a Richard Linklater film, has a really generic name that I can never remember.
Everybody wants some.
Yeah, so
just kind of like a spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, exactly. It's a post-high, what do they call that in America? College. There you go. A college sort of stoner about, a group of young men who are trying to make it onto the college baseball team. It's an interesting film. I quite like Richard Linklater as a filmmaker. Glenn Powell is exceptional in it. He was in the rom-com Anyone But You with Sydney Sweeney recently, which again he was very good and they had great chemistry on screen. And he's just got a smile that'll make him melt as well. So when he showed up in this film, I'm like, yeah, that's very good. But he does kind of seem to be playing more of the Carrie Elway's character from the original Twister than the Bill Paxton character. And Carrie Elway's was like the rival team of Twister Hunters or Twister Chasers that was, antagonizing Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt.
And I'm like, oh, are we now supposed to think that he's the good guy? The other one that I find really weird with this trailer is that I don't know if it's a sequel to Twister or a soft remake, because they tend to be doing a lot of the same things that the original Twister movie was doing. So I'm not sure what they're trying to do. Like it looks very much and it feels very much like that original film, but none of the original cast, and it's a little bit different, a little bit more sort of high octane than Twister. But bring back the disaster movie. I've been waiting for a good one for ages.
Well, I think this is the thing, right? It doesn't matter if it's a soft reboot, a sequel, or whatever. This is a massive budget B movie. Everything about it screams B movie. Everything about it screams like, right, we have this successful concept. What are we going to do? Double it. We had one Twister in the first film. No, two. Twin Twisters.
I probably told the story online. Do you know the story of James Cameron pitching the sequel to Alien?
No.
Where he just walks into the business meeting. Obviously Ridley Scott did the original one. He writes Alien on the board and then puts an S on the end and then turns the S into a $sign. And he's just like, cha-ching, baby, aliens. Put an S on the end, make it a sequel. We're printing money. I feel as though it should be Twisters with a $sign on the end here. This is exactly what they're trying to cash in on.
100%. But honestly, it just looks crazy, right? Like it's exactly what you want from a sequel to a disaster film. There's more disasters. There's more action. There's more crazy characters. That's it. Like, what more do you want? I think as well, I think we might be burying the lead here a little bit, because this film seems to experiment with, like, first of all, tornado chases, but then also there's a scene in it where Daisy Edgar Jones's character, they have a small discussion about, like, trying to use technology to stop twisters, and there's this sort of machine that looks like it's full of, like, nanotechnology of some kind.
That machine is from the original film. That was the whole point.
Is it?
So they had a little vat full of these little clear spheres with blinking LEDs in it, and the idea was that they would drive their truck into a twister. Those would get sucked into it, and they would get data readout of every aspect of the tornado. That was what Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt were trying to do.
But they're talking about data in that one. This one, they were talking about stopping it entirely.
But they're using exactly the same little devices from 30 years ago or whatever Twister came out, 96, I think, somewhere around there. Anyway,
so I guess my point here is that we made a film quite a while ago called Skrunk, the Prairie Dog, which featured a story where a laboratory that was investigating, I believe, how to stop tornadoes or even how to create tornadoes from scratch, accidentally created an intelligent hybrid animal called Skrunk.
I think also the tornado was intelligent as well, wasn't it?
I believe, yes, it was. Yeah, it was a nano tornado. And I just feel like, who ripped off
we ripped off Twister to create Skrunk, and then Skrunk ripped off us we were ripped off to create Twisters. And then when we create Skrunks, the Prairie Dogs, we're going to have to be ripping off Twisters. It's all a cycle of ideas piling on top of ideas, piling on top of ideas.
It's the infinity loop symbol,
exactly.
Right? That's what it is.
It's the Twister
who
eating
influenced
its own tail.
who? Exactly. All right, on to the next film in this week's episode, which is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, directed by Wes Ball and starring Owen Teague, Freya Allen, and Kevin Durand.
In their time, humans were capable of many great things. Noah! They could fly like eagles fly. They could speak across oceans. But now it is our time. And it is my kingdom.
I may have mentioned this before as well, but there's this thing on YouTube where trailers kind of also have their own trailers. Like the first 3 to 5 seconds of when you click on to play the trailer is a little snippet from the trailer, just to say, we promise this is going to be interesting. Here's like the coolest action shot of the trailer. If you can just pay attention for 1 minute and 10 seconds, we promise it's going to be interesting. I find it very strange that like film studios have so little faith in their audience that they don't think they have more than about 20 seconds worth of attention.
Usually that's because like you get the option to skip an ad after 5 or 6 seconds on YouTube. So the idea is that like they need to explode the best scenes at you to stop you from hitting that skip button. And to be fair, it has worked on me before.
Yeah.
For like films that I either wasn't aware of or wasn't super interested in, for some reason that 5 or 6 seconds was enough to get me to like just hang on that ad before I actually watched the video that I wanted to watch. So, there's something there about like just throwing, it just feels like, it feels like you're pelting snowballs at like an unwilling or an unassuming victim, and you're just trying to pummel them as much as you can before they actually turn around and take notice. Now, obviously, this film is a continuation of the very, very long-running Of the Apes franchise. Is that what it's technically? Is it technically the Planet of the Apes, or is it just Of the Apes? Because it seems to change.
Planet of the Apes, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I think they all have Planet of the Apes in there somewhere. So I imagine that's probably where they get the, or at least that all of them would say that they're of the Planet of the Apes franchise.
This is part of the rebooted Planet of the Apes franchise that kicked off in, when was it? Like the late 2000s?
So it depends on what you're counting as, because, you have the original film, I think it's 1966 or somewhere around there. And then they do 4 in that series. And then Tim Burton tries to reboot the original Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg in about 2001.
Yep.
And then I think in 2011 is Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is its own sort of sequel of 3 or 4 films. I can't really remember exactly which ones are in there. And then this is, I'm fairly sure, a continuation of that one. So
it is,
the Tim Burton one kind of sits independently, but people sometimes lump it in with the Andy Serkis ones. Anyway, it's maybe a continuation of the 3rd iteration. Let's put it that way.
I think this was always meant to be more of a like spiritually cast its bow back to the original Planet of the Apes film with Charlton Heston, and like from a aesthetic point of view, we're actually almost full circle there. We seem to be in that sort of like, humanity has definitely collapsed at this point. The apes are definitely in charge. Most of the humans are sort of in in like almost tribal outfits now as well. They're very ragged and run down, and they're constantly on the run. We're very much in the territory of like, you damn dirty ape now.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you know about the original films, but they are kind of like a continuous circle where you start with Planet of the Apes, and then in the second film is a continuation in the future when the apes are taken over, but at the end of the second film the Earth explodes. Like it literally is destroyed. Okay. And then the third film is set in like 1971 Earth, where apes from that Planet of the Apes have gone back in time to humanity, but then they have a baby like Caesar, who then becomes the hero who rises up to create the Planet of the Apes. And then the fourth film is midway between those 2 points where apes are taken over, and there is a war between humans and apes. So this one sort of feels very much like it's sitting in the first 2 films, which is in the distant future where apes are the dominant technology. Humans have reverted back to a more animal-like state, and the apes are like, humans once ruled this planet and had technology that we don't have. How do we create a kingdom or an empire which is more akin to what humans had originally?
Gotcha. So basically what you're saying is it's complicated.
It is very complicated. Of course, also originally based on a book by a French author, which was called Planet of the Apes, but I don't think, like, apart from the name, doesn't really share any themes with...
I think there's a lot more of a sci-fi bent on the novel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Although I also think they tried to get that same French author to write the film sequel to the Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes.
Yep.
And then they didn't like his idea and they threw out the script and just did their own thing. So it's all muddy and all intertangled. And then I think there's also a TV show of Planet of the Apes from the late 70s, which has been recut into film length things that sometimes sit within the canon and sometimes don't. So
yeah.
Look, it's a fun world, a future post-apocalypse that is very iconic with having these, talking monkeys. And really, if you're playing in that space, I think that's just a good place to be.
I gotta say, and I know we're getting a little bit away from this film, which again looks great, but like I just want to go back to the original series. They blew up the Earth in the second film.
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. So I mean, part of the story is that humans destroyed themselves through nuclear infighting.
Yes.
And so this is what caused humanity's decline and the ability for the apes to rise. But then there is like a cult that worships nuclear weapons, and they still have these doomsday weapons. Yeah. And so they're fighting at the end, and then the bomb gets set off. And like you literally then have like a voiceover by who directed Citizen Kane? I think I forget him. Orson Welles. I think it might be Orson Welles or someone of like similar caliber doing and then the Earth was destroyed forever and ever and ever. And you're just sort of like, what is the end? And then like, can you imagine being a cinema going person and then they announce there's a third film? It's like, what? I literally just saw at the end of this that how are they going to possibly continue this series after they explicitly say in voiceover that everything's destroyed and there's no more planets and all that can be seen.
The idea that like Orson Welles did a voiceover for it, and it just doesn't it sound?
I might be wrong about that, but I think it's like one of his last film credits, other than like Optimus Prime or whatever he did for the Transformers movies.
That's right. Yes. All right. I think that's enough of Orson Welles in Planet of the Apes. On to the last trailer for this week's episode, which is Wicked, directed by John M. Chu and starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, and Jeff Goldblum.
I am. Something is not the same. Something just takes over me. And when it does, bad things happen. Once you learn to harness your emotions, the sky's the limit.
So, if you're not aware, Wicked is, of course, based on the now very long-running Broadway musical. It is a retelling or a reimagining of the world of The Wizard of Oz. And I think it's actually a kind of a prequel to that, which is focused entirely on the two witches of the story, the Wicked Witch of the East. Is it the East? Or the Wicked Witch of the West?
The Wicked Witch of the West gets crushed by the house.
And
at the start, and she's the Wicked Witch of the East.
And the good fairy, Glinda the good
fairy.
Yes. Who are sisters, I believe. Or meant to be sisters?
So, the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wicked Witch of the East in this story are sisters.
Okay.
And
yes.
Glinda is just like a... I mean, I took my nieces to see Wicked earlier this year,
oh, yeah?
so I know the story a little bit better than I would have if you'd asked me before January.
Yep.
But you say it's based on a musical. The musical is based on a book written in the 90s, I think.
Yeah.
Which is then, of course, based on probably more so based on the popularity of the film. I was going to say Dorothy Gale, but that's Judy Garland playing Dorothy Gale film. And then the film is based on a series of books by Frank L. Baum.
Yeah.
It's just, stacks upon stacks upon stacks of inspiration based on and retellings.
It's the inception of intellectual properties, that's for sure. This kind of looks... I mean, it's a very like high fantasy, huge amount of effects. Get all the actors in there. Get Jeff Goldblum in there doing his Jeff Goldblum thing. I think this is definitely one for those who are very familiar with the musical, or maybe just those that have no patience for watching musicals and need to see it with effects.
There are a lot of musicals getting released as films. So the Mean Girls musical came out earlier this year.
That's true, yeah.
The Colour Purple had a musical version of it, which I don't think has been released in Australia yet, but came out last year in the US. Mm-hmm. And obviously Wicked being a very famous musical. I know at least with the first two that I mentioned, Mean Girls and The Colour Purple, there's this kind of thing in the trailers where kind of half trying to mask that they are musicals, as if to say we know that a large chunk of our audience aren't going to come see this if they know that it's a musical. So maybe if we kind of like hide the fact that they're going to break out into songs all the time, then maybe that part of the audience which would be turned off by that is still going to come, and the people who fans of musicals kind of know that it's a musical and are going to come. I don't think there's any hiding the fact that Wicked is a musical, right? Especially when you've got Ariana Grande playing Glinda.
I guess so.
I
guess so. But I mean, there is still that case of like bait and switch. It's like, here's all the action. It's like, haha, culture. I think you mentioned it in the last episode that the original Sweeney Todd trailers, the kind of the 2005 film with Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, directed by Tim Burton, kind of did the same thing as well, where it kind of front-loaded the trailer with all the action bits and all the like grim Victorian era imagery, and Johnny Depp being weird and Helena Bonham Carter being weird. And I don't think they ever mentioned at any point or even alluded to at any point that film is a musical, and it is based on a stage musical.
That might have been based on the back of talking about Wonka again, which Wonka does the thing where it kind of buries the lead that it is. You're going to have Timothée Chalamet singing all the time. So there's this, there must be this negative thing in the I don't know if it's the industry or whether it's just the people who are cutting the trailers together, where, or at least the thought is that nobody wants to see people singing on screen. But these films haven't been doing too badly at the box office, so maybe they're wrong. Who knows? Who knows? There was
a time in Hollywood, and I mean, I do actually like a good musical, but there was a time where, from the 40s up into the 50s, and as color and sound was introduced into cinema, like musicals did really, really well. And then they started...
The movie musical was a huge genre.
It was a huge genre. And then they started to dip, sort of getting into the 60s and 70s. And, you'd have big musical projects like Francis Ford Coppola, director of The Godfather and many other notable films.
And Jack,
yep. In 1968, sort of threw his weight behind a musical fantasy film starring Fred Astaire, the world famous dancer, and Petula Clark, and the film flopped massively. Massive miscalculation from Coppola and the studios. It's not actually a terrible film either. It's actually quite fun, but like the audience appetite just wasn't there. So I feel like ever since then, I think studios have been sort of a little less keen to sort of throw their money behind a big musical. But things seem to be changing. People have decided
there's definitely some themes in there,
that combination of action while people are singing is actually not as offensive as people may think. I do actually want to talk about, while we're on the subject of like slightly misleading trailers, the Super Bowl also featured two other trailers. One for a film called If, which is a kind of family film directed by John Krasinski about a child who starts being able to see other people's imaginary friends alongside her own. And then there was a trailer that followed it that used the word if quite prominently in its sort of graphics. Like it was the word was bigger than everything else. So it kind of implied that this was like an additional trailer for If. And everything was about how another child was, had an imaginary friend and so on and so forth. But then in the last, I want to say 5 to 10 seconds of this trailer, the film suddenly becomes a horror film. And it's a horror film called Imaginary, which is a trailer I've seen before where a child's toy kind of comes to life in a horrific and monstrous kind of way, and the child just sort of thinks it's an imaginary friend, and none of the other adults believe her, which I think is quite an interesting marketing move as well.
It almost feels like an extrapolation of that, Deep Impact Armageddon, where two studios are racing to put films out of the same idea.
Yeah.
But there is like a genre switch in there somewhere where it's we know that there's a film coming out about imaginary friends, and one studio is doing it. I think If has been described as, what if Pixar was live action?
Yep.
So it's kind of like trying to create that very kiddie feel, but having live action characters interacting with these imaginary friends. And then you have Imaginary, which is just like, what if instead it was like a Blumhouse horror slasher film?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I think it's fantastic. Yeah, I just, there was something about that combination of those two trailers kind of back to back that was like, oh, that's clever. I like that.
An idea that I like about that is if the same studio was releasing that, where they were kind of using this sort of like the marketing for one film to accelerate another film.
Yeah.
So yeah. It'd be interesting if you could do these dual productions and save a whole bunch of money on marketing because you're like you're saying they're using the word "if" in that imaginary title.
Yeah.
Just as you've heard about this other film that we spent all this marketing on. Yeah. Now, let's save some dollars by getting this one through as well.
Like the marketing cost on the second film is so much better because like you're just leaning on the other film. Look, again, the clever marketing people just know what they're doing sometimes.
We were having a discussion about because I think they released maybe, I think 11 films were shown during the Super Bowl, obviously each of them needing to have at least $7 million for whatever their 30-second spot were. And of those 11 films, there were only 2 original concepts. So like of the ones we've talked about, Twister, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and Wicked, all based on previous material. In the case of like Wicked and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, based on lots of iterations of previous musicals and books and TV shows and films and stuff like that. We had A Quiet Place Day One, which is a prequel to the Quiet Place series by John Krasinski we've talked about. So Moana 2 was another one which showed up in there, obviously another sequel. Inside Out 2, all of these sort of like sequels showing up, and only really If being like an original concept, and then The Fall Guy, which is the Ryan Reynolds, Emily Blunt film, which we didn't talk about last week, but we did talk about how we didn't talk about it last week. So lots and lots of big budget films coming out, but studios not really wanting to take a risk on anything that hasn't proven to be a moneymaker before.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. You need to spend that $7 million on the Super Bowl, so you really want to make sure that it's sort of like a heavy hitter.
You know what? You can't cast Adam Sandler in every film and guarantee that it's going to make 120% or 150% of its budget.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
Yep.
Studios can try it over and over again, and it can prove to be metronomically successful and predictable in exactly what outcome it's going to have. But there's only a certain number of Adam Sandlers to go around, and only a certain number of vacation spots that he's willing to go to.
Yep.
Sometimes you just have to make a sequel of a pre-existing franchise.
Sometimes he just wants to stay home. Okay, so until we crack how to make a film with Adam Sandler inside his own house, and so that it takes as minimal impact out of his life as possible, those are the breaks. All right, those are the 3 and a bit trailers for this week's episode. But of course, before we can do anything with those, we're going to have to take a little walk over to the green room. And here we are. So let's recap this Super Bowl spectacular collection of trailers. We have
a Lego sequel. We didn't use that word during the discussion, but it quite obviously is
We're using
a Lego sequel to a classic 90s disaster movie.
Indeed. We also have
a reboot of a 60s post-apocalyptic monster film. Monsters, I feel like I can't really describe apes as monsters. No. Surely they're just creatures. Post-apocalyptic 60s sci-fi is probably all we really need to hit on with that one.
Perfect. And finally, we have
a movie adaptation of a long-running Broadway musical.
Lovely. Plenty of choice this week. What are we thinking? What are we feeling?
I mean, the only standard that I really want to set with the film that we come up with, it has to be Super Bowl trailer ad worthy.
Yep.
It has to be that big budget blockbuster that you'd be willing to spend $7 million for a 30-second trailer.
I have already earmarked in our budget spreadsheet, our Excel budget spreadsheet, that $7 million that needs to go only towards the getting airtime during the Super Bowl, which I guess is going to have to be next year now.
I've opened up a new savings account at our bank, and we're just going to put a little bit of money in every week for the next 12 months or 11 months and 27 days until we saved up enough money so we can pay for next year's spot as well.
That's solid 4% per month return. Perfect.
It all adds up, really.
Yeah, it does.
And
every bit
depending
counts.
on who Taylor Swift is dating next year, who knows how many people are going to be watching the Super Bowl?
I mean, I like that you've talked about Taylor Swift. I like that we've talked about Taylor Swift because clearly, and I think we have to follow the example of Wicked here. Wicked had Ariana Grande. Taylor Swift has just done wonderful things for the NFL. And surely she could do wonderful things for a certain organization called MFS.
She is no stranger to being in Hollywood movies, having been in, I think, it's either New Year's Day or Valentine's Day or one of those, off the back of, I think Love Actually, they started putting out all these Gary Marshall rom-com, but that were more like a vignette series of relationships. She was in one of those at some stage. I don't actually know if she has any other film credits to her name.
I mean, she's been on SNL a couple of times, or a fair few times. I think she might have hosted at some point. So obviously she knows what she's doing behind a camera. She did that documentary about herself as well.
Miss Americana, or I can't remember exactly what it was called. Or something like that. Wasn't too bad.
Yep. So look, if you stick a camera in front of her, she's not going to go, "What is that strange device in front of me?"
So, and I think a little bit like Adam Sandler, just money in the bank every time.
Although we probably will need money in the bank to get her on board, so I think we're going to need to add another column to that spreadsheet for.
Oh yeah, yep. We'll open up another savings account and it'll be to pay Taylor.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we already know that she's going to be in it because we just need her there. I think. I mean, this has to be beyond blockbuster. This film. Right, so we have to. We need to do a big action film, surely.
Gotta be. So are we doing the disaster film element from Twisters, or are we doing the post-apocalyptic thing from Planet of the Apes?
It all seems to be centered around disasters. We also missed out on talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. That's all, big action, big superhero kind of like crossover events and this and that. I do like the idea of crossing like a crossover thing too of some kind, because I think there is something about that if/imaginary marketing duo that has just, got the gears in my head running. I can just see those numbers in spreadsheet just sort of ticking up and up. So I almost feel like we need to create a singular world starring Taylor Swift that then also has a spin-off film that's for a completely different audience that leans on the marketing of that first film. I'm not sure what that is yet. But have we, look, we've also talked about, for some reason, Sweeney Todd in the last 2 episodes. So do we need to do an action musical?
I like the idea of, when we were talking about it before, you said action musical in relation to Wicked, and I think you just meant it as a musical with a lot of moving parts to it. But I did think somehow of like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the musical, as being this sort of like high concept, action thing that is then also, breaks into song every once in a while.
If we did that to Terminator, we wouldn't be ruining the franchise any more than anyone else has at this point.
Everybody has had a crack at putting their own sort of spin on that franchise. I think even like James Cameron had involvement with Dark Fate and managed to get Linda Hamilton back in, but it still wasn't anyone's favorite installment in that series anyway.
I think on 2 separate occasions for 2 separate Terminator films, neither of which were directly related to each other, James Cameron was on board as a producer of some capacity. And I think in both situations he said, yes, this is definitely the direction that I would go in for the next Terminator film, or a direction that I personally, like, he gave it the big old James Cameron seal of approval stamp. And then at some point later, after the film came out and became a disaster, he kind of walked back his comments or completely disowned it. So I think that, the Terminator license has been passed back and forth over the years between various companies and holding companies and producers and so on and so forth. They're not really doing anything with it now after the last film in the which was Dark Fate, I think.
I think Dark Fate was the last one.
So I think we pick it up. I think we add another column to that spreadsheet. Is this
Taylor Swift? Is Sarah Connor in Terminator? Are we doing Terminator 2 the musical? Because
you want to take Terminator 2, the best film in the franchise, and turn that into the musical and not do a continuation?
Yeah, obviously we don't show that it's a musical in the trailer. It's just like, the the inside the letter O in the text is a little musical note instead of a hole, kind of like, and so it's like if you're really eagle-eyed, you'll see the musical note there, and surely that's enough to tell you that it's a musical.
All right, but can we do also this? Can we? I think as well. I would like to take the example of Wicked, in the sense that like Wicked as the title doesn't necessarily suggest Wizard of Oz, because it's just an adjective. And I do like the example we came up earlier of just like James Cameron adding an S to the end of a word to create the next thing.
Oh,
do we just call it
the money?
Do we just call it Terminators?
Terminators.
Yeah.
Is it an alternate retelling from a different perspective of the story of Terminator 2?
100%, yes.
I don't mind that at all, right? But from whose perspective? Well, because with Wicked, you're taking the antagonist.
Yep.
And you're sort of retelling their story to say, actually, from a different point of view, this person is quite good, and you can, spin and market everything. Do we tell
from the T-1000
is Terminators is Terminators the musical from the point of view of the in the future where the robots have taken over, but we show that they're actually kind of good, and they're doing things for altruistic reasons.
Yes.
And then you see this alternate perspective where they've sent the original Arnold Schwarzenegger back in time, and he got crushed by I've only ever seen Terminator once, where he gets, I think they crush him.
He gets crushed
and then,
by machinery, yep. And then in the second one, they send back a reprogrammed version of that Terminator, the T-800, to protect Sarah Connor's child, John Connor. But then the robots send back the T-1000, the metallic, molten metal, shape-shifting version, to kill...
So maybe our story is kind of the person in the time travel center who is trying to manipulate these timelines by sending these robots back in time to influence events, and it's their reaction to what we know has happened to previous iterations. But it is all from their perspective of as they're trying to correct mistakes that are being made in the past.
Weirdly enough, I had a thing where the T-1000's inner soul is actually like Taylor Swift, and we actually see the perspective of the T-1000's inner soul as like Taylor Swift singing all these songs about how they're misunderstood and how they can't, the actions that they're carrying out are the thing that they're programmed to do, but internally they don't want to do it. It's just not them. It's like they're fighting this internal voice of theirs that just wants to sing, that just wants to bring happiness to the world, but it's crushed. It's crushed by that programming.
Not all of the robots want a future where it's eternal war, right?
Yeah,
there is that faction wants to eradicate humans, but why can't we all just sort of like live in peace together? It's actually a concept in the fourth Matrix film, The Matrix Resurrections. One of the sort of more interesting ideas is that they show the sort of that humanity living in the real world, which has become a little bit more utopic, I guess. Some of the robots that were once against the humans have now joined them, and they sort of cohabitate together and help each other out, and are actually a much more harmonious relationship than what was previously in those Matrix films. So I feel like this is it, right? Like, surely in the future of the Terminator, where they keep sending back the T-1000s, there are a faction of robots, and there are a faction of Skynet protocols that don't want to do this. They're like, no, this is not the way. And I think that Taylor Swift is definitely the voice of that. I think so she's not Sarah Connor then. I imagine that when we don't ever really see Sarah Connor because if we do, it's her whatever actress we get, and we just deep fake Linda Hamilton's face on top of her, or whatever they do these days to make to bring back these beloved casts. But I think maybe she's an element in the system where you've got certain people who are sending Terminators back in time to create the post-apocalyptic future, but then she's weaving her own thing back in there. It's like, she's the one who's responsible for sending Arnie back in Terminator 2, or she's responsible for whatever, I don't really remember the rest of the Terminator films terribly well. There's a huge chunk of them that I haven't seen. But she's pulling the strings in the background to make sure that, Edward Furlong, survives, and who's Nick Stahl and Claire Danes, were they in the
They're in
Terminator
3? But I think what we do is, like every other Terminator film that's come out, we just kind of ignore that any other Terminator film has come out post Terminator 2.
I think I mean, what I'd imagined is that we actually try and do the more difficult thing, which is to create a connection between every single Terminator franchise. Because, like, you know, obviously everyone tries to ignore it, but they're all creating their own separate timelines. I imagine Taylor Swift sitting in front of this giant screen, which has these lines going across it, which is literally the timelines of every single Terminator film.
Yep.
And she's trying to create ways of bridging and editing and bringing it all together and tying it all together. I don't know if you're aware as well, but there's also a theme park only entry into the Terminator universe, which is Terminator 2 3D, which has like 10 minutes of original footage directed by James Cameron. It has the T1 million, which is, you know, obviously the next logical step up from the T1000, which is a giant spider Terminator liquid metal-y thing. Anyway, that's part of it. Dark Fate is part of it. Terminator Salvation, which is what Christian Bale and Sam Worthington is part of it. What was the one in the middle there with Mackenzie someone or other?
That was Dark Fate. So that was Mackenzie Davis.
Was that Dark Fate?
Yeah. She's actually human, but she's just an enhanced
Jason
human
Isaacs as well?
Jason Isaacs is in that? I don't think he is.
There was definitely one with Jason Isaacs in it. I thought it was separate to the Mackenzie Davis one, which is why I'm trying to remember Genesis or Genesis.
Genesis had Emilia Clarke in it, and
Amelia Clarke.
Jai Courtney, I think, was playing the.
Not Jason Isaacs. Who's the Australian actor whose last name's Isaac or something like that, or Jason from Planet of the Apes as well? I'm going to sound like a real fool here.
Jai Courtney.
Let's look up.
Jai Courtney was the guy that you're talking about, I think, who plays the. I mean, I haven't actually seen Genesis, but he was the one that was paired with Emilia Clarke's character, and I think Emilia Clarke is playing Sarah Connors or a version of Sarah Connors. Do we also need to bring in the TV show version of the Sarah Connors Chronicle?
Yeah, Sarah Connors, or anything that is part of that universe has to be in there.
Yeah, so this is like this is Terminator's Taylor version.
Taylor's version. It's fantastic.
Where we string it all back together in the same way that Taylor Swift took back her back catalogue from an absolute scumbag of a manager. Taylor's version of Terminators.
Just to go off on a tangent there. So, do you realise now that in recording studio contracts, they have clauses now that you agree that you will not re-record and release your own songs? She's changed the way that they do those contracts to stop recording artists doing what she did, which is essentially just taking ownership over her music from people who are selling it to, you know, random companies without her consent and doing whatever they want with it. They've found their work around there.
I mean, the important thing here is that only applies to music, doesn't apply to films yet. So we're gonna let her do what she did to music. 2 films specifically to the Terminator franchise, which, as much as I like it, does need rescuing. You know, there's no.
I just realised, and sorry to derail it again, I was talking about Jason Clarke and not Jason Isaacs.
Right. Okay.
That's my mistake. You know, although having, you know, Malfoy's dad thrown in there as well, maybe might add some gravitas or terror into the Terminator universe.
I think the scenes that include Taylor Swift, because they're obviously going to be new, they're not going to be, you know, part of any of the existing films. We can put Jason Isaacs in. I love Jason Isaacs. I think he's magnificent. I'm hoping that he can sing, because I like the idea of the 2 of them duetting.
Ooh.
Like a Huey Lewis and Gwyneth Paltrow style.
I just have this gut feeling that he can definitely sing.
Okay, good.
There's got to be a thing, right? I mean, yeah, I'm all on board. I reckon Jason Isaacs got a beautiful singing voice.
I think so too. I think you know, I love that guy. I think he's a great actor.
Is he actually the foil who is the other person in this time travel center who's sending the machines back in time to try and cause the robot apocalypse?
He's the malevolent force, and we know that he can play malevolent because, you know, Malfoy's dad, as mentioned.
Exactly.
He plays Sinister really well. Yeah, I like this.
See, so, I mean, interestingly. So I know we wanted to call it Terminators, but for somewhere in my head, the word Symbiosis has just come in here. Ooh. Can we call it Terminators Symbiosis?
Yes.
And it's like Taylor Swift trying to create a future in which robots and humanity can live together.
Do we also bracket it as saying Taylor's version, though?
Taylor's version. No, it's Terminators, Symbiosis, the musical, in brackets, Taylor's version.
Yep, great. You know what's great about that? There's so many S's in there that we can do a James Cameron style, just vertical lines.
So many dollar signs. Are there any L's in there that we can turn into pound signs, or E's we can turn into euro signs?
But just for our whiteboard, like obviously the actual marketing.
Yeah, exactly. Just mentally, we don't need the world to know that all we think about is money.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just so long as for our own sake, when we're running through these ideas, we can put it in there.
I mean, everything about this screams $7 million Super Bowl trailer to me. I mean, if anything, this screams like 2 $7 million Super Bowl trailers.
I vaguely also remember the year that Terminator Salvation had their Super Bowl trailer as well. Yep. So there is definitely precedent here. This is one of those franchises that does not miss out on those big marketing opportunities.
Yep. And I think as well, what I want to do is I don't want to actually use any footage from any of the films. I want to reshoot all the bits that they that we're referencing and reshoot them again.
I like that. You mentioned the Matrix Resurrections earlier. One of the things that annoyed me about that film was that when they showed clips from the supposed video game that the Matrix was based on, it was just clips of the film The Matrix. I'm like, if you're going to do that, why not just remake those scenes? Keep it's shot for shot, but make it look like it's a video game.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, right, this thing that I have experienced that I thought was a film was actually a video game. But I think what they missed an opportunity there. So I think that's what we do.
I think they were trying to be clever in that sense of like, oh yes, that film that you watched was actually a video game and so on and so forth. But yeah, look, I think...
it was, and of course, the cutscenes were so good. It looked like it was shot on 35mm film with a $150 million budget. Of course, how could I have been so naive?
Exactly. To get even more nitty gritty, the thing that I dislike, which is quite similar to that, is any film that comes out, a while later that's part of the franchise, and they make reference to a character that has died, usually through a photo of some kind, and it's just a production still from a previous film. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did it.
Oh yeah,
Ocean's 8, the all-female reboot, did that because apparently it's Danny Ocean's sister, who's played by
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock is Danny Ocean's sister, and apparently Danny Ocean has died before that film happened, and there's a picture of him, and it's literally just a still from Ocean's 11, and I'm like, who took this photo in this world? Who was there? And I hate that. So for our version of Terminators, we're going to reshoot all of it. It's not going to be archival footage. It's not going to be a bad CGI kind of like facial no, I think we recast all the actors. We do it all for real and make this universe feel, again, this is what Taylor would do. Taylor doesn't just, take the stems and the original recordings that she had and just goes, oh, we'll just, increase the levels here or, equalize it a little bit. No, she re-records every song.
Yep.
And then she owns them as a result. So I don't know if we're saying that she will own the Terminator franchise after this, but, it could be in worse hands, let's be honest, than Taylor Swift.
I think we should also probably learn our lesson from last week where we cast from a film that hadn't been released yet, so we didn't know if it was going to be successful or not.
Yep.
I feel like we should be going through the top box office films at the moment and pulling out the actors that we already know make bank. I'm thinking, I think who would make a really good Terminator if, someone's getting sent back in time, Henry Cavill. He's currently in Argyle at the moment. Didn't get great reviews, but making a lot of money, and he is a very bankable star, and he's also super buff in the way that Arnie was, which I think it makes a good Terminator. So if we're going to do that, that maybe Jason Isaacs, who we've already cast as the guy who's sending, maybe Henry Cavill is his Terminator that he's sending back in time. I think we also need to cast a Kyle Reese, who I think is Taylor's avatar for trying to send people back in time. Also from Argyle, Sam Rockwell's in there. I think he would be a very good Kyle Reese.
Sam Rockwell,
I think I like those as our 4 core cast members. You have Taylor Swift playing the trying to create Symbiosis. You have Jason Isaacs being the antagonist, trying to create the post-apocalypse of the machines, and he's sending Henry Cavill back in time, while Taylor Swift is sending Sam Rockwell as Kyle Reese to try and fix all the different mistakes throughout these timelines and try and stitch together this very disparate franchise all together into one cohesive unit, which I think
of that, all
narratively
the
makes a lot
elements.
of sense.
The TV show, every single film that's come out, even if they've implicitly said this has no real connection to the like existing term, no, they're all part of the same family now. It is Terminators Symbiosis. I really actually really like the name of that. Now
Terminators Symbiosis, the musical in bracket Taylor's version.
Taylor. Now, I know that we've already made this film and everything's done and dusted, signed on the dotted line. We'll get contracts out there. That Excel spreadsheet is chock-a-block full of like expenses that we now have to pay. Did we want to throw in a like if/imaginary style scenario where we have a second film or a second project that leans very heavily on
just riding the coattails of that giant...
Absolutely, yeah. As opportunistic as possible, very much core movie film studios of like taking an idea that's already out there and just expanding on it.
It's really doing a genre shift, isn't it? And I mean,
100%.
Having mashed up the musical and action genre already in Terminator's Symbiosis, the musical Taylor's version, I'm trying to figure out what genre you could...
It has to be something that's like the most objectionable to the audience that would go see Terminator. Like, because if you think about the audience that goes to see If, which would be family, young children, and so on and so forth, diametrically opposed to the people that would go and see Imaginary.
Realistically, we've got action fans, we have Taylor fans. The only like core group is either really old people or really young people. And so either we do like... I'm not saying, the Muppets Babies, like that thing where you're taking an existing franchise and just doing junior characters, or do we go the other route and do like a Best Exotic Marigold Hotel kind of thing where you're trying to get that old audience in, really struggling to make those ideas gel together in any cohesive way that has anything to do with the Terminator universe at all?
I honestly think, here's what I think we should do. I think what we're actually missing here is the film that, let's be honest, if you slap Terminator onto a film, critics are going to hate it, right? Critics have been all over Terminator 2. Everyone thinks it's the gold class of filming. Everything that's come out after Terminator 2 has been critically maligned, and every critic says it's not Terminator 2. It makes all the mistakes that Terminator 2 doesn't. Blah 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 blah. So I think that what we're actually missing here is a critic's darling.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can create from snippets of this film like a hard-hitting, dramatic, like cautionary sci-fi tale, a la like Ex Machina or a Blade Runner style, like really like gritty, Denis Villeneuve style sci-fi character drama piece that leans very heavily on the ideas of like Taylor Swift sending machines back in time.
So Denis got Dune 2 coming out, which is, that sort of very high concept, artsy sci-fi thing. I reckon maybe to get those people on board, riding the coattails, is maybe we do cuts of the film, which is, one of them is Terminators Junior, to try and get the kids on board. One of them is the Best Exotic Robot Killer Hotel. One of them is your Ex Machina style high concept thing. And we release all of these trailers that are like, purporting to be these different films. They go in, what is it? It's the same film. They're all exactly Terminator Symbiosis, the musical, Taylor's version. It's just very clever editing by our editing team to make it look like it's a different thing. And we get every demographic in to see this film.
Perfect. We're gonna have, again, crack open that Excel spreadsheet because we're gonna need to add multiple lines for $7 million trailers. We're gonna cut.
Oh, but that's the thing, isn't it? We're gonna have to release
five trailers?
different trailers. 5 trailers in the Super Bowl, all purporting to be different films. This is expensive, but
Disney is going to be furious. They're not going to have any space to show off any of their films.
Who owns the Terminator rights? Has Disney bundled that in at some point, along with like the Die Hard and Alien and Predator?
Terminator was in this weird kind of world where like a standalone company owned it for a while, and I think potentially now it's back with Universal.
Okay.
But
because that Terminator 2 3D was part of a Universal ride, so yeah, it does make sense that Universal would
Studio Canal apparently owns Terminator, and Skydance
Ooh.
Media for upcoming Terminator films.
Interesting.
So,
All right.
you know, the fact is, like, it's been lost to time. Who knows who owns these things? Who knows where those contracts are? Again, you get Taylor Swift involved and things just go your way. She didn't own the rights to any of her songs before she re-recorded them, so there's no reason why we/her won't own the rights to the entire Terminator franchise after we make Terminators Symbiosis, the musical, Taylor's version.
Yeah.
Problem solved. All right, and I think that's a wrap on Terminators, Symbiosis, the musical, Taylor's version. Housekeeping as per usual. Give us a like or a rating on any of the podcast platforms of your choice, just because it helps.
Yeah, exactly. If you've enjoyed this, then tell a friend to get back on board. I think we mentioned last week that, you know, it's been a while since recording, so you know, let your friends know that we're back. We're a little bit light on housekeeping at the moment. We're just sort of, you know, keeping it very casual with the recording and the releasing. So if you're listening, we enjoy you, we appreciate you. If you're not, which is, you know, probably almost everyone in the world, then we still enjoy you and we appreciate you. So hopefully you'll be a fan in the future.
We would enjoy and appreciate you even more if you happen to tune in. And you can visit moviefilmstudios.com if you're looking for a place to start. And I think that's it.
All that remains is to thank you again for listening this week. I've been Isaac.
And I've been AJ.
Roll credits.
Watch me